Hey guys, this video is basically about the cardinal sins that I see so many animators making time and time again, especially when I've got interns coming in or junior animators or even animators who've been in the industry for a while. These are just things that they sometimes forget. Now, obviously, the worst mistake you can make is forgetting the 12 basic principles of animation, but this video is not about that because that's a whole nother story. Although some of the points that are raised here do touch on those principles because obviously they are the foundation of any good animation. But these are the other mistakes that animators still really commonly make and ways to either avoid or fix those mistakes. Without further ado, let's get into what you shouldn't be doing and what you should be doing instead. Number 1, twinning. Twinning is basically when your character is symmetrical either in movement or in pose. Now, the way to avoid twinning is to put a slight delay on what could be symmetrical actions. For example, check out the shot here from Frozen, where Kristoff has his arms up on either side of him. Now, this is a gesture that is actually really commonly used, and with less experienced animators, they'll often use twinning. But see how in this shot his shoulders are uneven. One is slightly more raised than the other, and his head is tilted slightly. His body is tilted a bit too, his hands are not both rotated to the same angle, and then when he lowers his hands, one moves faster than the other. That movement is offset. So symmetry and twinning is avoided here in a myriad of little ways that all come together to make a really expressive shot. The same applies to facial expressions. If your character is blinking, offset the blinks. If their eyebrows are raising, delay the one slightly and change the angle a bit. You can also avoid twinning by having a slightly different camera perspective or a character that is not straight onto the camera. It makes for a far more interesting shot. Now, twinning is not always bad. It can be used in certain situations intentionally for really great dramatic effect. But you have to know what you're doing. And in reality, humans and creatures, basically anything organic, is not symmetrical. So for a more believable and realistic shot, you should really try to avoid twinning as much as possible. Now, the next huge mistake that a lot of animators do is forgetting to offset their movements. So what you can do is remember that it's actually a cascading effect. You're not going to have movements all happening at the same time. For instance, if I'm sitting here typing on my keyboard and somebody walks into the room, I'm not just going to turn with everything to face that person all at once. That's just not believable. It's not realistic. What instead will happen is that when I first register, my eyes will move to look, and then my head will follow, and then my shoulders, the rest of my body, and my arms will drag behind. Because your body is made up of different limbs, different parts. It's not all just one part. They're all separate parts that need to be communicated to by the brain. So the synapses are firing, and some parts of the body are going to get that message sooner than others. Also, some parts of the body can only move after another part has already moved. You need to keep this in mind while you're animating because otherwise your character is going to end up just looking like a puppet being controlled by you, the animator, rather than a thinking, independent character in its own right. A great example of this is in this scene in Up where Carl slumps down. First his eyebrows twitch, then his eyes close in defeat. His body starts to deflate and his right shoulder slumps while his left arm is still holding the door. Then his hand lets go of the door and drops to his side and the rest of his body follows the action. You don't have all this going on at the same time, but it's all really subtle when you watch it happen. Now, another mistake that I see a lot of animators making, and I hope it's a mistake and not just ego, is not using reference. Keep a mirror at your desk, take video recordings of yourself doing the action, or look online for reference, but please, freaking use reference. I have seen a lot of animators completely foregoing reference, and to me it is just mind-boggling that they think they can just animate a complex movement that a person or an animal is doing straight from their head. Even the animation greats use reference. Don't feel like you're above it. And then I'll see these young animators now, they'll sit and they'll tweak and they'll fiddle for hours, wondering why it's still not looking right, but as soon as they have a reference to study, they'll see that they're completely off with the way the face distorts or the anticipation and timing of the movement. Check out these reference shots that Emma Shee, an animator who worked on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, shared. I've linked to the article in the description, so please do yourself a favor and check them out. I adore watching reference footage and seeing the magic that these animators wove from their own reference footage. So much of being a good animator is just having this innate talent for acting. Another mistake that I see animators making pretty often is forgetting about weight balance and weight shifts. Remember that your character needs to balance. Now, this is especially common I've seen with 3D animators when they forget that they're actually working with the character in 3D space. From the front view, or where you think your camera is going to be, it might look like your character's weight is distributed properly, but when you change the camera angle, you see that in reality, they would be falling over. Always be aware of where your character's center of gravity is and how it is being supported by the character's limbs. You can imagine a plumb line the same as you would when drawing something. Weight shifts go hand in hand with this. Your character won't stand with their weight on both feet distributed evenly throughout different movements. Their weight will shift as their upper body moves, as they anticipate their next movement, and as they react to what's happening around them. Often the lower body and weight shifts are forgotten about when animators are focusing on the upper body, the arms, and the facial movements. Another mistake that animators sometimes make is forgetting that a character or an object actually has weight or mass. The points I just mentioned obviously also play into and affect this. Think about your character or the object in terms of how much it actually weighs, how heavy it is. Animating a really big guy will be very different to animating a little girl. She'll be quicker, she'll be lighter on her feet, and her movements will have more bounce. He'll move more heavily, slowly, with more momentum behind his movements and more counteraction. There's a great reference for this in the Animator Survival Kit by Richard Williams, which I've mentioned before in one of my other videos. Your character's weight will be conveyed with their posture, how they carry themselves, squash and stretch, anticipation, and exaggeration of poses and movements. I so often see walk cycles from juniors or students where it looks like their character is floating. Well, their feet are hitting the ground, but there's no impact behind their steps. There's no bend to the knees, there's no follow through, there's no power when they're pushing off the ground. And there's very little thought put into the distribution of the weight or the form of the character as they carry themselves. Never forget that your character has weight and mass, and that will affect all of their movements. This is also why so many animation students have to do a character picking up a box. Because then they can think about the pace of the action, the anticipation, the way the character braces themselves, and the weight of the object that they're picking up. So if you've ever been there as an animation student and you've done that exercise, or even if you haven't done that exercise, then you probably should, so that you can think about all these considerations in conveying weight and mass realistically when you're animating something. The next thing you need to avoid doing is isolating body parts. Remember that organic creatures have skeletons and muscles that are connected and affect the other parts of the body. This is obviously different if you're animating a robot or a mechanical object. But with humans and creatures, our muscles and bones are connected. The body needs to compensate for and respond to what is happening in other parts of the body. If you lift your arm, you'll see your shoulder moving too, your collarbone and your scapula. In this shot, where Anna is waving her arm, you can see it's not just her arm that is waving. The rest of her body's moving too, countering the movement. Even her head. Check out her other arm. Even though it's not doing any major movement itself, it's still moving in reaction. Try to remember that your character and its actions are the sum of all its parts. You're not going to have just one thing moving with nothing else getting affected. It's just not possible on a natural body. The last thing I'm going to mention is that a lot of animators seem to forget about the importance of the silhouette. Think about the pose that your character is making and what they are conveying, and then try to imagine if you were just looking at the silhouette of that character. Is the same message and the same emotions still getting conveyed to the viewer? The pose needs to be clear and easily readable, even if you can't see all the small features, and it needs to be appealing to the viewer. And the easiest way to see if it is all of these things is by looking at the silhouette. And this stands true for even just general drawing or illustration or painting. Your silhouette is really important for a strong shot. You should be able to tell what the character is feeling and doing and their personality traits just from the silhouette. For instance, a classic hero pose. He's confident, strong, he's feeling good, and you can read that straight away. But what about this? Doesn't look so good. You can't really read what's going on here with this guy. If you have a pose where the character needs to have their arms crossed in front of them, for instance, turn it so some of the arms break the line of the silhouette so you can read it more clearly, and bring in some negative space where you can. Mix up the rhythm, have the hips tilt at a different angle to the shoulders, avoid twinning, use interesting angles in the lines, and you'll have a much more interesting and dynamic silhouette. So, these are some of the things you should be avoiding if you really want to be a good animator. There are so many considerations that go into creating a really amazing animation shot, and these are just a drop in the ocean. But I guarantee that if you use these pointers, your animations will come out a lot stronger and much more believable. If you found this video useful, please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification button so you don't miss out on any more videos. Thanks for watching. Love ya. Bye!